this lesson, we're going to look at the first of a couple of master detail patterns. The first pattern is going to be showing a list of children in the details page for a parent entry. For example, expense reports can have a list of child line items. So we can see in the data manager, we can see how we've set up this relationship, right? So our line item has a many-to-one relationship to expense report, and it's expressed in this little arrow here, right? And we can right-click that to edit it to take a look at the details of this, right? So we have the many-to-one relationship between line item and expense report. That's stored in a required expense report field on line item. And importantly, the delete rule is set to cascade. So that means anytime we delete the parent expense report, we're also going to delete all of the child line items. Now let's set up the expense reports details page to also show a list of line items. Put a heading in first. Call this line items. Make it a little smaller. Okay, now let's put in our list. We'll use the Add Data Quick Start and select the line items business object. Select Get All on line items. Let's go ahead and just use that template for now. And we're only going to display the name and the amount. Okay. You can see now that the list is showing all the line item entries. So I only have three line item entries in this database table. But only two of these are actually related to this report. Right? So now we need to set up the filter on this list to only show line items that are related to this report. We do that by going into the service data provider for the line items, and we're going to set our filter criterion on this. So again, we need our top level OR. And again, this won't be necessary. Starting the next release, it'll just assume if you only have one criteria that the top level is going to be either an OR or AND. All right, let's do the attribute. The attribute is going to be expense report. The operand is going to be equals. Got to get my, all right, equals. And for the value, I'm just going to bind it directly to my expense report ID page variable that holds the ID of the report we're showing. And now if I go back to the page designer, I'll see that only my two values that are related to expense report 1 are shown. Now we'd like to add some fields to add a line item. We could use a quick start here and do add create page, which would create another page that would have the fields for entering a line item. But let's just show how we would do an inline form here to add line items. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to create a type and a variable to hold the payload to the post line item endpoint. So I'm going to create a type from endpoint, and I'm going to select line item post. Yeah. And here, very important, I'm going to select the request, not the response, right? And I want to have my expense report, my name, and my amount. I'll click finish. And now I'll create a variable of that type called new line item. And for the type, I want to choose this page type that I've created. And the only other thing I want to do is I want to default this value to page.variables.expense report ID. Right. Okay, great. So now I've got my data model set up for this. I can come in and create a form. I'm going to drop between the heading and the list. And here I'll put some input text And I will put a currency component. Let me select the list and make this a 2-column list. There we go. Now we'll set the text and the bindings for both of these. We're going to bind them to the fields in our new line item. This one will be bound to the amount. Okay, and let's take this whole form and shrink it down a little bit. Good. Now we can add our button. And we're going to call this add. And we can use the quick start to generate an on-click event. So this is the action chain that will respond to the on-click event on that button. And what do I need to do here? We need to do 3 things. First thing we need to do is call the post endpoint to create the new line item. Then we need to tell the list of line items to refresh so that it shows the new line item. And finally, we need to reset the new line item variable to null so all the fields in the form are empty. So let's do those things. Go. Call post on line item. Let's pass in new line item as the body. And let's say create line item. Okay. All right, and then we said the second thing we needed to do was to refresh the list. So refresh line items, right? Little snafu here. These fields here sometimes don't show until you've either selected something else or changed the name, right? Okay, we're going to set this to refresh, and we're going to say that we want to refresh the list of line items. And finally, we want to reset a variable, and the variable that we want to reset here is the new line item. Okay, let's see how that worked. So I'll select something, click edit. And here's my line items, and I can say another one was car, was $100. Add that. It gets added. My fields get cleared. My list gets refreshed. So there you have it. That's how you do a basic inline edit form over a list of children in the parent. And in the next lessons, we'll look at a couple of other patterns.